Chosen 1. Public conversations about wealth often focus on visible outcomes, income levels, lifestyle changes, and social status. What is discussed far less frequently is the internal preparedness required to manage rapid financial change. Research and historical patterns consistently show that sudden increases in wealth do not guarantee long-term stability. In many cases, they accelerate personal, psychological, and relational stress when internal structures are underdeveloped. This is why financial elevation cannot be evaluated purely through numbers. The condition of the individual receiving it matters just as much as the amount itself. One commonly cited statistic illustrates this clearly. A significant majority of lottery winners experience severe financial decline within a few years of receiving large payouts. This outcome is not caused by money itself, but by the absence of preparation, discipline, and long-term planning. Sudden access to resources amplifies decision-making patterns that already exist. Without internal regulation, wealth can destabilize rather than secure. This pattern reveals an important principle. Financial growth tests character before it rewards comfort. Periods of delay, scarcity, or limitation are often interpreted as failure or exclusion. However, when viewed through a broader lens, delay can function as preparation rather than denial. Time spent without abundance often forces individuals to develop skills that later become essential: restraint, discernment, emotional regulation, and long-term thinking. When resources are limited, choices are narrower. This naturally encourages planning, caution, and reflection. When resources increase, options expand rapidly. Without discipline, this expansion can overwhelm decision-making capacity. The transition from limitation to abundance is therefore one of the most critical phases in financial development. Money does not alter personal values. It intensifies them. This is why sudden wealth frequently exposes unresolved internal issues. Individuals who struggle with insecurity may seek validation through spending. Those with unresolved resentment may use financial power to control or distance themselves from others. These behaviors are not created by wealth. They are revealed by it. Psychologically, money functions as an amplifier. It increases access, visibility, and influence. Each of these elements magnifies existing habits and emotional patterns. If impulse control is weak, spending accelerates. If boundaries are unclear, exploitation becomes more likely. If identity is unstable, external validation becomes addictive. Because of this, long seasons without visible financial progress often serve a corrective purpose. They allow time for internal development to catch up with future responsibility. Emotional maturity, once developed, acts as a stabilizing force when financial conditions change. Another common misconception is that financial success automatically produces happiness. Numerous studies contradict this assumption. While financial security can reduce stress related to basic needs, it does not resolve deeper issues related to identity, purpose, or emotional health. In some cases, increased wealth intensifies dissatisfaction by removing external excuses and forcing unresolved issues into focus. Wealth functions less like a solution and more like a diagnostic tool. It highlights habits, priorities, and motivations that were previously hidden beneath survival concerns. This explains why preparation often involves prolonged periods of invisibility. During these phases, individuals are not being ignored. They are being observed. Consistency, integrity, and restraint demonstrated during low visibility seasons provide critical indicators of future behavior. Another overlooked reality of financial elevation is exposure. Wealth attracts attention, not all of it beneficial. Relationships often shift when financial dynamics change. Long-standing connections may become transactional. New relationships may form around opportunity rather than mutual respect. This is why timing matters. Early exposure, before discernment is developed, can lead to misplaced trust. History is filled with examples of individuals who lost not only money, but peace, reputation, and purpose due to premature access to influence. Delay, in this context, serves as a filtering mechanism. Time reveals intentions. Patterns emerge. Loyalty is tested not by abundance, but by absence. Those who remain consistent when there is nothing to gain demonstrate a level of alignment that cannot be fabricated. Isolation during preparation is also common. Reduced social engagement, limited validation, and fewer external affirmations create an environment where self-awareness can develop without interference. While uncomfortable, this isolation often strengthens decision-making independence. Another critical aspect of financial elevation is responsibility. Wealth increases impact. Decisions affect more people. Mistakes carry greater consequences. This requires a shift from reactive thinking to strategic thinking. Individuals who navigate this transition successfully often share specific traits: patience, restraint, ethical consistency, and long-term orientation. These traits are rarely developed under conditions of immediate gratification. They are forged over time, through delayed outcomes and disciplined choices. Financial growth also introduces ethical complexity. Opportunities increase, but not all opportunities align with sustainable values. Offers may promise rapid expansion at the cost of autonomy or integrity. Without clear principles, it becomes difficult to evaluate these trade-offs objectively. This is why discernment becomes more valuable than capital itself. The ability to assess not just profitability, but alignment determines long-term outcomes. Another dimension often overlooked is psychological pressure. Visibility brings scrutiny. Success invites comparison. Expectations increase. Without emotional resilience, these pressures can erode confidence and clarity. This is particularly true for individuals who experienced prolonged underestimation earlier in life. When recognition finally arrives, it can trigger self-doubt rather than confidence. This phenomenon, often referred to as imposter syndrome, reflects a lag between external validation and internal self-perception. Preparation helps close this gap. Repeated exposure to responsibility, even at smaller scales, builds internal evidence of competence. Over time, confidence becomes grounded rather than performative. Financial elevation also reshapes priorities. Consumption gradually gives way to construction. The focus shifts from what can be acquired to what can be built. This transition marks a move from short-term satisfaction to long-term contribution. Those who succeed in this phase begin to view wealth as a system rather than a possession. They invest in infrastructure, education, and sustainable models rather than symbolic displays. This mindset preserves resources while expanding impact. It is also important to acknowledge resistance that often arises from others. Not all responses to success are supportive. Some individuals interpret another's progress as a threat rather than inspiration. This reaction often stems from unresolved frustration or comparison. Managing these dynamics requires restraint. Public justification rarely produces resolution. Consistent behavior and ethical stability over time speak more clearly than confrontation. Another reality is that wealth alters boundaries. Accessibility decreases as protection increases. This is not a rejection of others, but a requirement for sustainability. Without boundaries, expansion leads to depletion. Strategic distance allows focus. It preserves energy. It reduces interference. While this shift can be misunderstood, it is often necessary. Financial elevation also introduces complex decision-making environments. Legal, contractual, and regulatory considerations become more prominent. Advisors, consultants, and partners enter the picture. Each relationship carries influence. This reinforces the need for alignment over urgency. Decisions made under pressure often sacrifice long-term stability for short-term gain. Disciplined pacing protects both resources and reputation. Perhaps the most important principle underlying financial readiness is stewardship. Wealth that is treated as a tool rather than identity remains manageable. Wealth that becomes a measure of self-worth becomes volatile. Stewardship requires humility, accountability, and continuous learning. Markets change. Systems evolve. Assumptions must be revisited regularly. This perspective reframes success. The goal shifts from accumulation to sustainability, from visibility to effectiveness, from possession to responsibility. The preparation phase, often misunderstood, builds the internal framework required for this transition. It strengthens discernment, emotional regulation, and ethical clarity. By the time financial acceleration occurs, those who have endured preparation recognize it not as a reward, but as an assignment. They understand that increased capacity requires increased discipline. This is where the narrative often diverges. Some individuals pursue wealth for validation. Others receive wealth as a byproduct of alignment. The difference lies not in opportunity, but in readiness. And it is at this point, where preparation meets exposure and capacity meets responsibility, that the next phase begins. The next phase begins when responsibility becomes unavoidable. At this stage, financial growth is no longer theoretical. It manifests through opportunity, access, and expectation. This is the point where many individuals falter, not because they lack intelligence or ambition, but because internal structures have not fully solidified. One of the most immediate changes during this phase is the shift in decision speed. When resources were limited, decisions were constrained by necessity. When options expand, choice overload becomes a real risk. Without a clear framework for prioritization, individuals can move rapidly but inefficiently, mistaking motion for progress. This is where discipline transitions from an external constraint into an internal compass. Discipline is no longer about restriction. It becomes about alignment. Every decision begins to ask a different question. Does this move strengthen or dilute the system being built? At this level, impulsive behavior becomes costly. Small inefficiencies compound. Minor misjudgments scale quickly. What once would have resulted in inconvenience can now produce lasting consequences. This reality forces a recalibration of mindset. Another critical adjustment involves emotional neutrality. Financial elevation amplifies emotional responses, both positive and negative. Excitement can lead to overcommitment. Anxiety can lead to unnecessary control. Control. Without emotional regulation, decision-making becomes reactive. This is why many high-performing individuals deliberately slow their response time despite having the ability to act instantly. Deliberation becomes a strategic advantage. The capacity to pause, assess, and consult data rather than emotion separates sustainable growth from volatile expansion. Relationships also undergo a significant transformation at this stage. The nature of interaction changes subtly but consistently. Conversations shift from shared experience to perceived value. People begin to associate access with benefit. This does not occur because of malice, but because financial dynamics alter expectations. Managing this shift requires clarity rather than suspicion. Not every change in behavior is opportunistic, but discernment becomes essential. Trust must be based on patterns, not proximity. Long-term observation replaces immediate assumption. This period often reveals the difference between relational loyalty and situational convenience. Those who respect boundaries without resistance demonstrate alignment. Those who react negatively to limits often expose misaligned expectations. Another adjustment occurs internally with identity. When external circumstances change rapidly, internal identity can lag behind. Individuals may still operate from a mindset shaped by scarcity, even while navigating abundance. This mismatch can lead to self-sabotage. Examples include overworking despite sufficient resources, underpricing expertise due to outdated self-assessment, or avoiding visibility out of fear of scrutiny. These behaviors are not irrational. They are adaptive responses that no longer serve the current environment. Updating identity requires intentional reflection. It involves acknowledging growth without guilt and accepting responsibility without self-judgment. This transition is rarely instant. It unfolds through repeated evidence of competence and consistency. At this stage, structure becomes more important than motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Structure sustains. Systems for decision-making, delegation, financial oversight, and personal boundaries reduce reliance on emotional energy. High-functioning individuals prioritize systems early. They recognize that willpower is finite, but structure compounds. Clear processes free cognitive bandwidth for strategic thinking. Another notable change is the relationship with time. Financial stability alters how time is valued. Urgency decreases, but responsibility increases. Time becomes less about survival and more about allocation. This often leads to a reassessment of commitments. Activities once accepted out of necessity may no longer align with strategic goals. Saying no becomes more frequent and more necessary. This is not withdrawal. It is focus. The ability to decline opportunities without justification reflects confidence in direction. It signals clarity rather than indecision. Over time, this selectivity improves outcomes rather than limiting them. Public perception also shifts during this phase. Visibility increases, sometimes unintentionally. This exposure introduces external narratives that may not reflect internal reality. Managing this requires restraint. Over-explanation rarely corrects misinterpretation. Consistency does. Over time, patterns speak more accurately than statements. This understanding reduces the need for defensive communication. Another pressure that emerges is expectation management. As capacity increases, others may assume availability. This can lead to overextension if boundaries are not enforced. Boundaries in this context are operational tools. They protect energy, maintain quality, and preserve sustainability. Without them, even positive intentions can lead to exhaustion. Financial elevation also introduces ethical testing. Opportunities may arise that promise rapid gain but compromise autonomy, values, or long-term stability. These moments test clarity. The absence of immediate financial pressure can actually make these decisions harder. When survival is not at stake, temptation becomes more subtle. This is where internal alignment proves decisive. Individuals who have cultivated long-term orientation recognize that not all profitable options are constructive. Declining such opportunities reinforces integrity and preserves direction. Another important element during this phase is delegation. As complexity increases, doing everything independently becomes inefficient. Delegation requires trust, communication, and oversight. This process can be challenging for individuals accustomed to self-reliance. Letting go of control does not mean relinquishing responsibility. It means reallocating effort to higher impact areas. Effective delegation also requires clarity of standards. Expectations must be communicated explicitly. Vague direction produces inconsistent results. This phase often exposes gaps in leadership skills. Technical competence alone is insufficient. Emotional intelligence, communication, and adaptability become equally important. Leadership at this level is less about authority and more about coherence. Teams respond to consistency. Systems respond to clarity. Financial elevation also affects personal rhythm. Sleep patterns, health routines, and stress management require adjustment. Increased responsibility without physical regulation leads to burnout. Sustainable success depends on physical and mental maintenance. This includes rest, nutrition, movement, and reflection. These are not secondary concerns. They are foundational. Another shift involves risk perception. With more to lose, risk tolerance changes. Decisions become more calculated. This does not indicate fear, but maturity. Calculated risk accounts for downside as carefully as upside. It includes contingency planning and scenario analysis. This approach preserves stability while allowing growth. At this stage, individuals often recognize the importance of counsel. Advisors provide perspective that internal analysis cannot. However, discernment remains essential. Not all advice is equal. Alignment matters more than credentials alone. Advisors must understand long-term goals, not just immediate metrics. This period also invites reflection on legacy. Questions shift from acquisition to contribution. What will remain? What impact will persist beyond personal involvement? This reflection influences investment choices, mentorship decisions, and structural design. Long-term thinkers prioritize durability over visibility. Another important adjustment is emotional detachment from outcomes. While accountability remains, over-identification with results increases volatility. Stability improves when effort is prioritized over outcome fixation. This mindset allows for learning without self-criticism and adaptation without defensiveness. It encourages continuous improvement rather than perfectionism. Over time, individuals who navigate this phase successfully develop a distinct quality of presence. They are calm under pressure, deliberate in action, and consistent in values. This presence is often misinterpreted as confidence, but it is more accurately described as coherence. Internal alignment reduces friction. Eventually, financial elevation stabilizes into a new baseline. What once felt overwhelming becomes routine. Systems mature. Decision-making simplifies. At this point, the earlier preparation becomes visible. Discipline replaces urgency. Clarity replaces reaction. Structure replaces chaos. The individual no longer chases growth. Growth responds to alignment. This is not an endpoint, but a transition into sustained contribution. The focus shifts from building capacity to applying it responsibly. The preparation phase, once misunderstood as delay, is now recognized as essential infrastructure. Without it, expansion would have collapsed under its own weight. Those who reach this stage understand that success is not defined by accumulation, but by stability under expansion. And it is from this stabilized position that the final phase emerges, not driven by urgency, but by intention, where influence is exercised with restraint, and progress is measured by durability rather than speed. The final phase is defined less by expansion and more by consolidation. This is where momentum stabilizes into rhythm and movement becomes intentional rather than reactive. The urgency that once drove action no longer dominates decision-making. Instead, clarity sets the pace. At this stage, the individual no longer measures progress by volume of activity, but by quality of outcome. Fewer actions produce greater results. This efficiency is not accidental. It is the result of accumulated experience, disciplined filtering, and refined judgment. One of the most noticeable shifts in this phase is the relationship with pressure. External demands may still exist, but they no longer dictate internal response. Pressure becomes information rather than a trigger. This emotional neutrality allows for consistent performance, even in unpredictable conditions. Another defining characteristic is restraint. The ability to act without acting immediately becomes a strategic advantage. Silence, when chosen deliberately, communicates confidence. Delay, when intentional, preserves leverage. This is also the phase where identity stabilizes. The individual no longer experiments with versions of themselves. They operate from a settled sense of role and direction. This does not imply rigidity, but coherence. Adaptation occurs within a stable framework rather than through constant reinvention. Public perception continues to evolve, but it holds less influence. External validation loses its motivational power. Internal standards become the primary reference point. This shift protects focus and reduces distraction. At this level, relationships become fewer but more precise. Quantity is replaced by alignment. Interactions are purposeful, efficient, and mutually reinforcing. Time spent no longer requires justification because it is intentionally allocated. Trust now is built on demonstrated consistency rather than proximity or history. The individual understands that alignment is dynamic. Relationships are evaluated not by longevity, but by relevance to current direction. This phase also introduces a heightened awareness of impact. Decisions are no longer assessed solely by personal outcome, but by their effect on systems, people, and long-term stability. Responsibility expands alongside capacity. With this awareness comes a refined ethical framework. Choices are filtered through principles rather than convenience. This internal governance reduces cognitive friction and simplifies decision-making. Another important development is the shift from personal achievement to structural contribution. The focus moves from what can be gained to what can be built. Systems, processes, and frameworks become the primary outputs. This shift often manifests through mentorship, institutional development, or legacy-oriented projects. Knowledge accumulated over time is no longer hoarded. It is transmitted selectively. Transmission, however, is deliberate. Not everyone is prepared to receive what has been learned. Discernment governs distribution. This protects both the knowledge and the recipient. The final phase also demands reconciliation with earlier stages. The individual revisits past challenges not with resentment, but with understanding. What once felt obstructive is now recognized as formative. This reconciliation is not nostalgic. It is integrative. Past experiences are contextualized and incorporated into present wisdom. Nothing is dismissed. Everything is reinterpreted. Another defining feature is patience. Not passive patience, but strategic patience. The individual understands timing as a variable, not an obstacle. Waiting becomes an active choice. This patience allows for optimal positioning. Instead of forcing outcomes, the individual aligns conditions. This reduces friction and increases probability of success. Financially, this phase emphasizes sustainability. Growth is no longer pursued aggressively. Stability, resilience, and adaptability take precedence. Risk is managed through diversification and foresight rather than avoidance. Wealth, if present, is treated as a tool rather than an identity marker. Its purpose is utility, not display. This perspective preserves discretion and long-term security. Health and well-being also receive renewed attention. The individual recognizes that longevity requires maintenance. Physical and mental care are integrated into routine, not reserved for recovery. This integration prevents burnout and preserves clarity. Performance becomes consistent rather than cyclical. Energy is managed rather than expended. The relationship with failure also transforms. Failure is no longer personalized. It is analyzed, contextualized, and integrated. Learning replaces self-judgment. Similarly, success is no longer romanticized. It is acknowledged, measured, and normalized. This emotional balance maintains momentum without inflation. At this stage, leadership becomes quiet. Influence is exerted through example rather than assertion. Authority is recognized rather than claimed. People respond not to charisma, but to reliability. Predictability in values builds trust. This trust compounds influence over time. The individual also becomes more selective with exposure. Not every platform, conversation, or opportunity is accepted. Visibility is calibrated rather than maximized. This selectivity preserves signal integrity. When communication occurs, it carries weight. Silence increases the value of speech. Another notable shift is the refinement of ambition. Goals become fewer but more consequential. The focus moves from breadth to depth. Depth creates durability. Deep systems outperform broad but shallow efforts. This understanding shapes strategy. The final phase also introduces a broader temporal perspective. Decisions are evaluated not just by immediate effect, but by second and third-order consequences. This foresight reduces unintended outcomes. Legacy thinking becomes natural rather than aspirational. The individual asks not how they will be remembered, but what structures will remain functional without their involvement. This perspective informs succession planning, documentation, and decentralization. Dependency is reduced intentionally. At this level, control is replaced by trust in systems. The individual steps back without disengaging. Oversight replaces micromanagement. This transition can be challenging, especially for those accustomed to direct involvement. However, it is essential for scalability and sustainability. Another aspect of this phase is acceptance of limits. The individual acknowledges constraints without frustration. Limits become parameters rather than obstacles. This acceptance allows for creativity within structure. Innovation thrives under constraints when they are understood rather than resisted. Emotionally, this phase is marked by steadiness. Extremes soften. Satisfaction replaces excitement. Fulfillment replaces anticipation. This does not imply stagnation. Growth continues, but it is measured and intentional. Expansion occurs within capacity. The individual also becomes more tolerant of ambiguity. Not everything requires immediate resolution. Uncertainty is managed rather than eliminated. This tolerance reduces anxiety and preserves focus. Energy is conserved for variables that can be influenced. Another defining quality is gratitude without dependency. Appreciation exists without attachment. This emotional maturity supports resilience. As this phase matures, the individual often becomes a reference point for others, not through promotion, but through presence. People seek perspective, not validation. Providing this perspective requires restraint. Advice is offered selectively. Guidance is contextualized rather than prescriptive. The individual understands that each person operates within their own phase. What is appropriate for one may be premature for another. This awareness fosters humility. Experience does not produce superiority, but perspective. The final phase is not static. It remains adaptive. However, adaptation occurs within a stable identity. Change no longer threatens coherence. Ultimately, this phase represents integration. Skills, experiences, values, and systems converge into a functional whole. The individual operates with minimal internal conflict. This integration allows for sustained contribution without depletion. Impact becomes consistent rather than episodic. The journey that began with uncertainty concludes with clarity, not because everything is known, but because decision-making no longer depends on certainty. The individual moves forward, not driven by pressure, but guided by alignment. Progress continues, not through force, but through design, and it is within this alignment that influence becomes durable, contribution becomes meaningful, and stability becomes the foundation for whatever comes next. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to pause before moving on. Not every video is meant to entertain. Some are meant to clarify. When content reaches you at a specific point in your journey, it often aligns with questions you have already been carrying quietly. That alignment matters. If you found value in this analysis, consider supporting the channel by engaging with it thoughtfully. Liking the video helps ensure that clear, structured, and grounded discussions like this continue to reach people who are looking for understanding rather than noise. Subscribing allows you to stay connected to future content that examines growth, responsibility, and long-term alignment without sensationalism or exaggeration. Sharing this video is another meaningful way to contribute. Many people are navigating significant transitions privately. They are not looking for motivation built on pressure or fantasy, but for language that helps them interpret what is happening in real time. If you know someone who might benefit from this perspective, sharing the video could provide clarity at a moment when it is most needed. Your comments also play an important role. If a particular section stood out to you, or if something in this message helped you see your current situation more clearly, leave a comment below. You do not need to explain everything or reveal personal details. Even a brief reflection helps shape future discussions and signals what topics deserve deeper exploration. For those who are new here, this channel focuses on calm, intentional analysis rather than emotional escalation. The goal is not to overwhelm, but to provide context, structure, and perspective. These videos are designed to be revisited, allowing ideas to settle and connections to form over time. If that approach aligns with how you process information and growth, you are in the right place. It is also important to remember that progress is rarely loud. Many of the most significant shifts happen without public recognition. They occur through consistency, restraint, and decisions that prioritize long-term stability over short-term validation. If you are currently in a phase that feels quiet or transitional, that does not mean nothing is happening. Often, it means the groundwork is being reinforced. Stay attentive to how you allocate your time and energy. Growth is not just about accumulation. It is about discernment, choosing what to engage with, what to ignore, and what to build quietly often determines the durability of what comes next. If you want to continue receiving content that emphasizes clarity over chaos and substance over spectacle, make sure notifications are enabled. This ensures you do not miss future discussions that build on these themes and explore them from different angles. Finally, thank you for spending your time here. Attention is one of the most valuable resources available, and choosing to invest it intentionally matters. Whether you are watching, listening, or reflecting afterward, your presence supports the continuation of this work. Remain grounded, stay deliberate, and continue choosing alignment over distraction as you move forward.